Hi and welcome back. This might be a bit of an odds and ends sort of an episode. I'm a bit of a terror for just leaving my junk wherever I last used it. I think I learnt that from my dad. You know, I remember as a kid going into the garage and not being able to find any screwdrivers, so I bought my dad a screwdriver for his birthday. When I gave it to him, he's like, "Why are you buying me a screwdriver? I've got like 20 of them." And I'm like, well, I couldn't find a single one. So we go to the garage and sure enough, he looks around and finds about 20 screwdrivers lying all scattered throughout the workshop. Oh well, I guess it's cleanup day. I bought a new used toolbox. It's pretty nice. A bit worn, but still in pretty good condition. My safety glasses, well, they used to live here, but that's not going to work. Oh, maybe that'll work. Winter's coming, I'll soon be able to burn that. These don't live here. I guess I better 3D print some sort of a system to put these all in order, huh? Those thumbtacks don't belong there. Belongs up here on the pin board, next to the 777 backup generator data plates. Another issue is trash. This is sort of my trash corner, and I always use these rubbish bags, but then they kind of overflow and then it's on the floor, and I separate the paper and the other stuff, but ends up being a mess. I was out at my friend's and I found that he had this empty, and I figured, hey man, that'll make a perfect rubbish bin, so he generously gave it to me. It's been drying now for weeks. Yeah, it's probably safe to cut as it is, but I think I'll fill it with water. Yeah, if you're going to cut open a can like this, even if it's been well vented and you can't smell the fumes, it's always safer to fill it with water. Makes a bit of a mess, but better a mess than an explosion. Tin snips and shears always come in both left hand and right hand cutting versions, so you kind of need both to get around the corner here. Now I'll take the paper out as well, throw it in the paper recycling. That's better. That's one of those little jobs I've been procrastinating on. Of course, doing this job is a procrastination from finishing off the controller of the lathe. This is my aircraft sheet metal tool box. And the reason I've been procrastinating so much can be found here, or in this case, is missing here. Yep, you guessed it, the tailstock. Now if you were to take a poll of all mini-lathe users and ask them what's the most consistently crappy part of a mini-lathe, the tailstock wins the #1 position. These things are basically horrible. It's manufactured out of an upper and a lower casting, and they have a mechanism to be able to offset it to turn tapers. Of course, you don't need that on a CNC lathe, so to improve rigidity, I epoxied the upper and lower halves together. The upper casting with the bore tends to be reasonably well made. The main problem's here on the lower casting. As you can see, these sliding surfaces weren't so much machined as dragged along the road behind the car. I'll blue up the ways with a pretty heavy coat of Prussian blue. And then we'll print the tailstock to these ways and see how awful it is. And there we have it. It was in use for long enough that there's a bit of wear, so there is a bit of contact on the ends. Here I've put a clock on it to measure the concentricity between the #2 Morse taper and its barrel. I've put a stop on this end to keep the whole thing from moving axially, because of course there's a taper, so I'd get a wrong reading if we moved axially. There's a bit of a drop off when this keyway touches the V-block. So now the final measurement from 0, it drops down to 7/10 and returns. So we've got 7/10 of a 1/1000 of an inch total run out. And for our next trick, the base is magnetically attached to the body of the tailstock. The ram's been inserted about halfway, and we'll just look at how much play there is between the ram and its bore. And vertically, it's just under 3 thou. Yeah, let's call that 2.5 thou, 25/10. Let's look at it sideways. Maybe it'll be much better. Yeah, nah. No great improvement in that direction either. That's a bit of a surprise. That same 2.5 thou. I guess we'll call that a feature, a self-centering chuck. One thing of note is that either the ram or the casting's bore is conical, because as we've moved this from extended further in, you can see that that play almost completely disappears. I'd suspect that the problem's more likely to be with the bore than with the quill, but let's have a look. Yeah, it looks reasonably consistent, about 30 microns under 22 millimeters, pretty much along the whole length, so I guess it's the bore that's not parallel. So the moral of the story, when using this, don't extend the ram. To check the alignment between this and the bed and the spindle, I'm going to need to be able to clamp it down. At some stage I did a Camlock modification, looks like this. There's this sort of cap here, which this goes into, and then an eccentric shaft acts to lift this drawbar. That pulls up on this plate. It was made by brazing a piece of steel to a piece of bronze. I think I did this simply because I didn't have anything else the right size. So unfortunately this just wants to jam up. Well, it still fits nicely in here, so the width between it seems fine, but it doesn't fit well underneath, so I think I'm just going to have to narrow this down on both sides. Yeah, I'll just put on the mill and just take a millimetre off each of those edges, I think. This old Tony contacted me to ask me if I knew the specification of this green which our Maho's painted. And I'm like, dude, RAL 6011 Recedi green. That's not really a colour, that's more of a cultural icon. Deutsche Industrie Norm 1844. Painting of machines, green. Now some of you might see this and think of that Deutsche Gründlichkeit, you know, that sense of orderliness that Germans are somehow famous for. But just as New Zealanders are pretty immune to the charms of the Australians, everyone here in Austria doesn't really believe in the Deutsche Gründlichkeit. When we see DIN 188, painting machine tools green, we don't see a system of orderliness or having everything precisely arranged. What we see is a few engineers, a few beers laughing their ass off when they get their standard published. Well, I was blown away by the amount of interest in last week's video on the Maho, and I really appreciate all the great comments we've received, so thanks a lot, guys. Let's keep that up. Since everyone seems to like Maho action, let's do a little bit. I need to touch off on this lip here and then mill 6mm further up. That's now fitted. It's maybe a little tight. Oh yeah, that fits nicely now. That now feels really nice. Doesn't matter where it is on the bed, it locks at exactly the same angle. So, yep, that was a good improvement. Well, now that the tailstock's lockable, the next thing I need to do is to turn a piece of bar here to exactly match the diameter of the quill. I've got about 0.43 of a millimeter to come off. So 29.98 versus 29.977. That's basically perfect. Now I can shove this tailstock up to close, a bit more. Clamp it. Now I can measure the offset. So now with the gauge on the top, we can check the horizontal alignment. Zeroed it on the quill. Now if we move it across onto that slug I turned, it shows that the tailstock is 2.5 thousandths of an inch high, which is a good thing because I'm going to have to take some metal off the base. The bad thing is I'm guessing I need to take more than 2.5 thou off to get that to print nicely. But so that's what it looked like with the ram retracted. Let's just put and tight. When unlocked, the quill sits about 0.5 thou higher than when I lock it. So if I look at this again, we should be now down about 3 thou. Yeah, 3.5. That's a good sign. As long as it's high, I can do something just by taking away metal. I'll just see how repeatable that is. No, that looks pretty good. Next thing, I'll move the clock to the side and we'll check the side-to-side alignment. Right, let's zero this and see what the horizontal alignment's like. Well, pretty close to nothing. Well, that's good news. I guess for our next trick, let's extend the ram. And see what that's like. Yeah, so with the ram extended, it's angling about 2/1000 of an inch backwards. Let me just quickly scoot along the length. Yeah, it's got a slight angle towards the back. I guess I can try and scrape it in a little bit more to rotate it slightly, but it's only a very small error. Let's look at the top. And go backwards and forwards. Now we're just going to do a fast traverse and just see how horizontally aligned it is. It had gone slightly up, so that means the tailstock is pointing very slightly down over its length. Yeah, just under a thou. And there you can see the plan for scraping. So the whole thing needs to come down, slightly more at the back than at the front, and rotating the nose of the tailstock slightly towards the back. Now I've had a fair few new subscribers in the last couple of weeks, so some of you might not have seen this. This is my Coborn power scraper. It's an old English power scraper. It's really too large to be much use on such a tiny job as this, but the really cool thing is it's got this lapping wheel on it, which I've got a bit of diamond lapping compound on. So while scraping, you just flick it on and give your scraping tool a bit of a touch up. It certainly helps your scraping being able to just touch up the tip of the carbide frequently. I'm still rough scraping at this stage, but the contact points on this surface and this side of the VUA are starting to come in. This side's still got quite a hollow in the middle.
Later.
Well, it's starting to come in now. That's a bit heavy on the ink there, but you can see it's getting better. I've still got a drop off along this edge. Not sure if I'll get rid of that completely. It's also reasonably light through the middle here. And also this edge is a bit low, but it's coming in. I'll do one more pass and then I'll measure again. So I think I've got contact even enough on all surfaces. I'll now get in and try spotting for a little more contact. Well, it's still a little bit high. It's nice and even though, within just a couple of, oops, I hit that on the end. Looks like it's even within a couple of tenths horizontal, which is good. So It can still come down a little more. That's the result after 13 passes. I've got pretty even coverage all across all three ways. The tailstock is now sitting about 1/1000 of an inch high, which is slightly higher than it should be according to Connolly. I'm going to leave that because the area is so small and this cast iron so soft that I think it's going to wear quite quickly. Leaving a little bit of meat on there means there's a chance to do one more scraping before it goes too low. This is the original hand wheel, plastic. There's nothing wrong with it, worked fine, but I had this one left over from another project. It's only slightly bigger, so I figured I'd put that on there. Looks nicer. Won't be using that again. Well, there we have it. That's the tailstock done. I'm still going to put a little measuring scale on there, but I think that's enough for this week. Missed last week's video, I was just too busy. So let's get this cut. Once again, thanks very much for watching. Big welcome to all of the new subscribers, and I'll see you next time.